Welcome to the 10th Annual Book Festival. On behalf of the Nantucket Book Foundation, we are so thankful to have you here, for without you, there would not be a book festival. I am Rebecca Hickman, the middle school librarian on Island and a newly elected member to the Nantucket Book Foundation board. I am honored to introduce the award-winning author, Tiya Miles. For her 2021 National Book Award winner for nonfiction, All That She Carried, The Journey of Ashley Sack, A Black Family Keepsake. In this moving and illuminating account, Tiya reveals the history of 3 generations of Black women and the preservation of familial bonds as she takes the reader on a journey of unpacking a simple cotton sack that has been passed down from generation to generation. This sack symbolizes love and perseverance during dark and difficult times. In the words of Janina Edwards, narrator of the audiobook, Miles addresses the silence so many Black people face when they try to explore their family history. They are confronted by this wall of slavery. All That She Carried has won a number of awards, including the 2022 Penn John Kenneth Galbraith Award, and most recently, the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, which is a national juried prize for literature that confronts racism and explores diversity. Tiya lives with her husband and children in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and is a professor of history at Harvard University. Thank you for writing this book, Tiya. We are so pleased to welcome Tiya and you all to the 10th Book Festival.
Thanks, Becky. Hi, everyone. My name's Mary Bergman, and I'm the chair of the Nantucket Book Festival. I'm also executive director of the Nantucket Preservation Trust, just across the street. And I'm very excited to be here talking to Tiya and to so many of you about Tiya's wonderful work, which I think has just really moved so many people. I'm so thrilled to see all of you here. Can we see how many people have read the book already? Okay, and who's going to read it afterwards? Yeah, okay, excellent, excellent. So Becky gave a really great introduction about what the book is about a little bit. So, a journey of a story of 3 women, a story of familial love between a mother and daughter, and really a story of where uncovering the past is the story. And I'm so glad that you're all here. I wanted to just ask Tiya a couple of questions, and then we'll have some time for your questions at the end as well. And All That She Carried is really this great work of material culture studies, and your exploration of Ashley Sack teaches us how to read an object the way that we might a source like a newspaper or a diary. And can you tell us about some of the methods that you use to uncover these histories of people who've been traditionally excluded from the historical record?
Can you all hear me? Excellent. I don't know where Becky went, but thank you, Becky, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Mary, for your question. I'd like to take just a moment, if you don't mind, to say a few things before I answer it.
Yeah.
I want to say first, thank you for being here, you all. I greatly appreciate it. I wasn't sure when I saw the weather if anybody would show up today. I will do my best to do that. Thank you for letting me know. If you can't hear me, once again, let me know. Better? Better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the thumbs up in the back. Thank you for those of you who have already read the book, and despite Mary's coercive polling there, I'm grateful to those of you who are interested in reading the book in the future. It was an incredible project for me to embark upon. It took several years, and it took quite a lot of emotion and quite a lot of reflection and quite a lot of support on the part of other people in order for me to complete that book. If Mary doesn't mind, I think what I'd like to do for just a second is to read aloud the embroidered inscription which appears on the old cotton bag, which is now referred to as Ashley's sack. And Ashley's sack got its name from a curator down in South Carolina when curators at the Middleton Place Plantation received the sack as a donation, as a gift, from a flea market shopper who found it in a rag bin in Tennessee. I know. So if you can, those of you who haven't seen it yet, imagine an old, rough, discolored, oversized, utilitarian cotton sack with frayed aspects to the fabric, with holes, with places where it has been mended. Now I'd like for you to picture stitches on that sack, which make up the following sentences. My great-grandmother Rose, mother of Ashley, gave her this sack when she was sold at age 9 in South Carolina. It held a tattered dress, 3 handfuls of pecans, a braid of Rose's hair. Told her it be filled with my love always. She never saw her again. Ashley is my grandmother, Ruth Middleton, 1921. This is the object that Mary has just asked me to reflect on, an antique bag that was used in its original purpose for carrying something like seed, that was repurposed by an enslaved African-American mother who was attempting to send her daughter into an unknown future with things she might need to survive, and especially with love, with the knowledge that no matter what happened, this daughter was cherished and cared for. That daughter was Ashley, and this is why the curators down in South Carolina named the bag Ashley Sack. Ashley did carry that sack, and she passed it down to her daughter, Rosa. You can hear the echo of the mother's name there. And Rosa passed it down to her own daughter, who was Ruth. Ruth moved north to Philadelphia to try to make a new life for herself, as many African Americans did. And in Philadelphia, while working as a domestic worker, and when she was a very young mother, Ruth embroidered the story on the sack. And now we have the opportunity to see it, to be near it, and to reflect upon it. So, Mary, you have asked me what it's like to work with objects and about the authenticity of objects and how that's different than just reading a text. Mm-hmm. When I started work on this project, in which I was hoping to identify the women on the sack who were really not known before this research was undertaken, and to identify the origins of the bag, I was someone who had mostly done work in documents. I feel most comfortable with documents. I love text, I love literature, I love narrative. And I was not a specialist in things. I had incorporated things in a minor way in some of my previous books, such as histories that I have written and a novel I have written. Don't worry about that, that's okay. On slavery in the Cherokee Nation. And for those projects, I did some thinking about baskets made by Cherokee women and about their artistry, and I compared Cherokee women's artistry with Black women's artistry in the form of quilt making on a particular Cherokee plantation. But those were not deep dives, those were brief reflections. Working on this project completely reoriented my experience with research.
Wow.
But I love documents. I love them. Do not get me wrong, okay? But there's something about objects, about things that invite us into considering their meanings because of their three-dimensional, tactile, multi-sensory nature. I mean, we are sensory beings, and working with things, thinking about this sack really opened up my use of my senses in terms of doing the work of history. Because there was so little to go on in this project, there really was just the bag. There really was just the bag, you all. And that beautiful, haunting story embroidered on the bag. I was compelled to fixate on it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had heard about the bag about a year before you actually saw it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was that experience like of standing in front of it for the first time? Have you been able to touch it with your hands, even with any white gloves?
No.
No?
I have not.
We should call Kevin Young and change that.
You know, I would love to have the chance to touch it, even though I would worry a bit about how that might affect the textile itself. I have to go into I'll try to go into this briefly, but I want to go into a story of how I found out about the sack, because I think that it's important in that it points out how so many people can have an impact on the projects that others will take up and on the formulation of the ideas that will follow. I was attending an environmental studies conference in Savannah, Georgia, and our focus in that conference was on the ecologies of the southeastern coast. And after I gave a talk about ghosts and hauntings on St. Simon's Island, happy to discuss in Q&A if you'd like.
Yes.
A member of the audience waited to speak with me for quite a long time. He just kind of stood off to the side and waited for the line to shrink. And I was looking at him, he was looking at me, and I wasn't sure what his intentions were. It was the South, you all. The South is a complicated place. This was an older white man, older than me, wearing a baseball cap. I apologize for any stereotypes that may have gone into my thinking in that moment when I saw him waiting for me, waiting for the crowd to dissipate. Because he was someone who had a gift for me. And the gift was an idea. He told me, you've just talked all about ghosts, enslaved ghosts. You have got to see this thing called Ashley's sack. Mm-hmm. It turns out that he was a retired scientist and also a local journalist. And so he had written a story about Ashley's sack when a curator had come through visiting from South Carolina and had just given a local talk to folks about the item. And this person, his name is Ben Goggins, thought that I should see it. And he thought that so fervently that he emailed me and emailed me and emailed me. After that first interaction, he sent me links to his articles, and he included commentary and reflections on his own experience with what was happening on the island that he lived on off the coast of Georgia and how more intense storms were affecting his life there. And I took him up on it. I explored it.
So are you taking any tips after this?
Absolutely, always
Okay.
open to tips.
I think we were getting some tips before.
Absolutely, I was. I sure was,
Yeah.
about a Bible on this
Yeah.
island.
Yeah.
So when I then went to try to see the sack, I learned that it was no longer in South Carolina because it had been loaned to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. They weren't open yet. And all of their collections were still, in storage and being prepared. So I did have to wait quite a long time and didn't have the chance to see it until about a year later.
Wow. Has anybody been to the museum? It's really spectacular, I think. One thing that really struck me about this book was just the role, it's a history, but I don't know, I've read a lot of history books, and it is a history book. It's more than that. It's also a story about love. And if you haven't seen Ashley's sack, you can go on your phone or on the computer and see a picture of it. And all of the proper nouns are capitalized. It's like really beautiful embroidery. But the L in the word love is also capitalized. And to me, I thought, that you talk about the idea of the sack carried these essentials, but it also carried a mother's love. And I don't know that I've really read a book that was like this, where love was kind of looked at in a historical way as well. And, you really brought in, I thought, a real emotional core to the book. And I wondered, what was the experience of that like, working as a historian? You've done other kinds of writing. Why love? How did love get in here? And that, I can't end this question well, so there you go.
Love became the center of the book because love is in the center of the embroidery. It's almost that simple, but you're right in your question, Mary, when you imply that this is not a typical kind of historical approach. Mm-hmm. I avoided recognizing and accepting that the book had to be about love for months, maybe even years, because I was concerned that talking about love would be too simplistic and it would be too obvious. And in historical work, our job, our duty, is to bring all the sources to bear that we can find to generate original arguments that we can support. To me, to say that a mother loved her daughter didn't really seem very original. And for quite a while, I was trying to find a way to make the book more, let me say, serious. Now, that was a journey for me, and I now completely disagree with my original orientation, because what ended up happening is that I went to the source, which is what we are supposed to do as scholars of history. I went to the source, I relied on the source, and the source was telling me that love was crucial to these women, to this family, to this story. As Mary said, love is capitalized, and you all, if you'd like, you can Google the sack right now and look at it. I won't mind. Love is capitalized in the embroidery. Love is the biggest word in the embroidery. It's in the middle of the embroidery. It's in bright red. And a colleague of mine down in Georgia pointed out that when he saw the embroidery, it looked to him like the words might be arranged in the loose shape of a heart. I hadn't seen that before. When he said it, I thought, oh, it's possible. It's really possible. And so that had to be the center of it. And I had to try to find a way to sort of make the case and justify it for the readers who would be academic historians. And one way I did that was to bring in some discussion of a subfield in historical studies, which looks at the history of emotions and thinks about emotions as a historical subject, which change over time.
So you trusted the source.
I did.
Yeah.
I trusted the source enough to tell me that I needed to ask more questions about what it was saying.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. You know, you talked about the book being not a traditional history. You've written other histories. You've written a novel. And I think the writing in this book is really beautiful. I also think it's accessible. You know, I do think a high school student could pick this up right now in its form and digest it and walk away, or, you know. Anyway, I wondered if your experience of writing a novel, your experience doing other types of writing, how did that inform this book? Because it does have a unique style, I think, all its own.
I think at this point that every book demands, calls for its own approach in the writing. And as I mentioned earlier, there were very few primary sources available about this family and about the SAC. It had to be a creative undertaking. And that situation really encouraged, inspired, compelled me to write the book differently than I had written past histories. I wanted to honor the object itself and the embroidery, the story in my own writing. And it struck me that Ruth Middleton's embroidery seemed like so many things. And one of those things that it seemed like was a poem. And so I thought about trying to find a poetic mode for historical writing.
So this book has been out for a while, and I'm just wondering, have people come up to you with other objects that they've found in their, I'm sure they have, that are, yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they have, and it's been incredible. It's been amazing. It's been eye-opening to receive people's emails and to see photographs, because many people do share photographs of objects in their families and of objects in their cultural experience. I have received many photographs of Bibles, which tend to be an important way that families hold on to memories and keep information about loved ones who have passed on. I have seen a number of photographs of embroidery that have been passed down through families. One reader sent me a link to a story about a green sweater that a little girl had hung onto while her family wasn't hiding during the Holocaust. A person sent me an email about a song that had been passed down in her family. And there are many more examples that I wish I could catalog them. I cannot, but I will say, this gives me a chance to actually plug this, that the New York Times is doing a project right now on family heirlooms. And I had the chance to have a bit of a hand in this. The project should be going live today. It might even be live now while we're sitting here talking. And there is going to be a call out as a part of the project, inviting people to submit their names, their heirlooms, or objects that are special to them, and their stories. And then once we collect these, we're going to do some more thinking and writing about them.
Wow. That's, I think, one of the things that's so powerful about this story is it's so specific and you go so in depth. And I think, one thing I've been thinking about is the pecans, the 3 handfuls of pecans that were in the bag, and the detail, and you even, the arborist at Harvard gave you a pecan tree, so you could learn what that was like. And this very unique experience that was, tragically shared by so many people of enslavement, but then the larger experience of just wanting to feel that connection to your past is something I think everybody feels, and it like ripples out in this resonant way. So I just love how you took something that was really hyper-specific and telescoped it out. I don't know, have you done any embroidery yourself? Have you done any embroidery while doing this? It's
she
such
laughs.
a big part, yeah.
I am not so great with the needle. When I was in college, I took a quilting class. Well, I didn't actually finish it, but I started a quilting class, in part because I just love that tradition of women's quilting, and particularly Black women's quilting. And I'm so glad I took that class. I still have the supplies. I'm not giving up quite yet. But I'm not ready for embroidery, but many women in my family from all different backgrounds, because my family has, people who are African American, who are Native American, who are Euro-American. Many women across those different groups in my family do various kinds of needlework. And so I am the happy and proud recipient of many, many, objects of embroidery and stitchery and crochetery, I don't know if that's a word, of knitting, of quilting.
Well, you wrote this wonderful book that sort of, elevates all that to the forefront. I can see that we're going to be heading into the Q&A soon. But beforehand, I just wanted to touch on this op-ed that you wrote in February that I feel like was, one of the most moving things I'd ever read. I'm sorry to cry. But I'm somebody that worries about the future a lot. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. And, you wrote about what you learned from Black women and Black history, and this idea of when it feels like the world is ending, you can really draw on the past. And I have just felt like that is such an incredible, it was revelatory. I mean, it's simple, but it was so revelatory. I'm so sorry. And anyway, I can't read the quote because I'm going to cry. I see you even more. But I just think a lot of us feel that way, that we're like on this precipice and we're not, and the world keeps going. And I just think that I got that out of this book, and I hope everybody reads it. But I just wanted you to know, what other historians or writers out there are working in Black history, writing about Black history that you would recommend to us. And if you want to tell us a little bit about what you're working next, I'm so sorry.
Oh, Mary. I'm grateful to you for asking that question and for allowing yourself to cry in here with all of us, because I feel that we need more spaces like this. I really do, and this is partly why I try to write in the way that I do about the topics that I choose. We're in some dire straits, right? We are. I don't think this is news to anyone. There are multiple dimensions to our problems. And I think oftentimes we live our lives on two levels. We go through our day and we take care of the things that we know need to be done. We meet our responsibilities. At the same time that we know that things are fraying and possibly even falling apart. On the political level, in the social sphere, in our cultural world, and certainly when it comes to our environmental context. Not being able to express that and talk about that, I think it just adds to this sense of anxiety and isolation. I think that we have to be able to talk about it and to even begin to think, okay, what are we going to do? And I don't know what we're going to do. I don't really think anybody has solutions. But one thing I do know is that people have gone through terrible, terrible circumstances and times before. They haven't been the same as what we're experiencing now, because that's what history is about. It's about change. Things change. But they have gone through those times. Many of them have survived those times. Those who did not survive can be remembered and can be honored. And I find inspiration in those facts.
Yeah. So if you haven't read that, I really encourage you. I think it's just, like obviously it moved me. Does anybody else have any questions? Take the heat off of me right now. Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna run the mic to you so we can get it on the TV. Yes, this is gonna be recorded forever.
Your work draws upon the broader conversation of historic preservation and objects. And I'm not trying to offend any baby boomers here, but the baby boomers are in the last season of life, and the New York Times reported that their children, they don't want the china, they don't want the family heirlooms, and so they just want to sell the house and take the money and throw all that stuff away. So what can we do to kind of invoke an appreciation for the younger generation for objects and family traditions and historic preservation overall?
Thank you for that question. I think that the things that we have left to us from the past retain incredible meanings about life and relationship and values and principles. I think they are precious and that we must preserve them. We must care for them. By preserving them and caring for them, we are actually holding on to those memories and those values and those principles. I think of it sort of like, I guess, economists say that if you have a house, if you're fortunate enough to be able to own a home, you're sort of accidentally saving, right? Because that house is hopefully going up in value over time, and you're just paying your mortgage. And all of a sudden, wow, you got equity. I think of it in a similar way, that these things that we have from the past, these buildings, these objects, retain the memory of people and places and ways of living. Sometimes that's inspiring, sometimes that is cautionary and a reminder, do not do this again, right? We need those touchstones. And so when it comes to younger people, I have 3 of those in my household. And I can't say they have shown a great deal of interest in the things that we have in our families that have been passed down. Not quite yet. But I think that we have to just keep doing the work that many schools and libraries and youth groups are already doing of introducing these kids to those places and to those buildings and to those things that are related to their past and the past of their communities. I think this is especially important on the local level, because if we don't take children to architectural landmarks, to historic sites in their neighborhoods, in their communities, in their cities, their towns, on their islands, how are they going to know this is important? We have a shared investment in this. We want to work to save and preserve this. They won't know. So I think that's one thing that we can do, is to continue to introduce children and youth to those sites and to the notion of stewardship. I think we can fund those opportunities. Any philanthropists in the room, could contribute even more to public schools and libraries and organizations. And I think we also have to story these things. I mean, that's what Ruth Middleton did, which I think was so brilliant and important, that she storied, she attached story to Ashley Sack in a way that would be lasting. She took the time to stitch it down, and that's how we know about it. Oral culture is wonderful, oral history is beautiful, oral tradition is fantastic, but many of us in this day and age, and especially in Western cultures, don't have those traditional skills of how to retain oral traditions. We've lost many of those skills. And so we really need to write things down, sew things down, sketch things, represent things so that they can be passed on. I think storying the past for youth can be an important part of helping them to see that it matters to them.
Any other, okay, all right there. Liz? Hi.
Hi, I just wanted to know, because when you were talking and I was sitting here in tears, so when you're writing something like this, how do you keep yourself from dissolving all the time?
Thank you for that question. I don't keep myself from dissolving. And I really want Mary to know that, especially. I don't want to shut myself off from the impact of these histories and these stories and these things. If so, what's the point, right? I mean, I think that we want to be, or many of us want to be feeling beings. We want to feel. And I think that feeling and the knowledge that that feeling can sometimes help us to approach and accept can lead us to take action in ways that can help other people, that can better our families, that can better our communities, and maybe even better our country. And so I do let the emotions come, and I have incorporated some kind of tricks or approaches to help me. And one of these approaches, it might seem kind of strange to many folks in the room, but it's not going to seem strange to everybody in the room, is to remind myself that this is the present, actually, and not the past. Sometimes when I'm really deeply tunneled into the slavery records, and this has especially been the case since I've been a mom, and I read records about children being sold, I just cannot take it. When I was working on Ashley's sack in the beginning, when I first got a chance to see it at the Smithsonian, it was actually on display next to some text because the exhibit where it was about sale, and it was on display next to text that just listed various sales and ages and prices. And right next to Ashley's sack was an inscription on the wall about a boy, a black boy who had been sold for a couple $100, who was 7. My son was 7 at the time, and I just couldn't take it. Sometimes I think it is partly about the power of these objects that Mary and I were talking about earlier with all of you. Sometimes it's very difficult to just remember, actually things are okay, or things are relatively okay. The present is not the past. I just tell myself, oh, this is 2021, 2018.
This is 2022 right now.
2022. It's 2022, and it's not 1862. That actually is something that I have to do because I allow myself to go so deeply into the materials that I start to just think, oh my God, what could happen to my daughters if? And then I think, okay, this is 2022. I also make sure that I write next to a window because that gives me a reality check and it allows me to see beyond what I'm working with. I spend a lot of time outside, which I find to be recuperative. And I also talk with other people who do this work because everybody is melting down. And I think it's very important to not feel alone with those emotions and with the weight of the work.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I just had a question about with everything going on about this backlash with critical race theory and everything. Have you faced any of that with your book? Like the woman, who I can't remember her name, that did the 619 project was denied tenure at North Carolina.
That was Nicole Hannah-Jones.
Yes.
And she was denied tenure at UNC, but she got a fabulous job at Howard. So, you know, she sprang right back. There are lots of opportunities out there. I have not experienced negative pushback around the critical race theory conversation. In fact, a woman who came to an online discussion from a library in Maryland said that she appreciated this book so much because it was like some kind of diversity training, and yet it was nothing like a diversity training. I will say, though, that the internet, it can be a cold, dark place. And I have received some very ugly comments from people. I have received some very ugly emails from people, which don't talk about critical race theory, but just want to call me the N-word and worse, and say things that they want to do to me. I have had one Zoom event that I did Zoom bombed in a vile way. I won't go into details. It was beyond what you could imagine could actually happen that people would do, vile. And this is all very disturbing because it is, okay, it just is, but also because a part of what I write about in All That She Carried is Black women's sexual abuse during slavery. When people make threats that have those kinds of echoes, and when they get online and do things that have those kinds of echoes, it is incredibly disturbing, upsetting, and destabilizing. But those folks are not seeking to have an intellectual argument with me. That's, I don't know what they're, I suppose I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. They're not trying to talk about critical race theory. And I think that those people who seriously want to engage questions of how race is taught in classrooms or how race is discussed in the public sphere should be engaged in those questions. They should have those conversations. We can have those conversations together. I don't think it has to be as vitriolic as it has become. I think people have become panicked, and I think people have been led by what seems to me to be a propagandistic political campaign, which has attempted to gather anything that has to do with race into this, bucket or basket of critical race theory. That is completely inaccurate. I don't think that's doing us any good.
Yeah, totally. I think, I know we have to wrap up, but just the overarching theme of your book is the humanity of these people, of Ruth and Ashley and Rose. And you can't not read this book and think these are people that are experience, the world just like you do. And anyway, Tiya, you've written a beautiful book. It's moved a lot of us, and I hope that people will stop by and get their books signed and enjoy the rest of your day here on Nantucket.